Guys, today I'm reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, starting with chapter 12 for you. The title of the chapter is What It Said on the Golden Ticket. Charlie burst through the front door shouting, "Mother, Mother, Mother!" Miss Bucket was in the old grandparents' room serving them their evening soup. "Mother!" yelled Charlie, rushing in on them like a hurricane. "Look, I've got it! Look, Mother, look! The last golden ticket, it's mine! I found some money in the street and I bought 2 candy bars and the second one had the golden ticket and there were crowds of people all around me wanting to see it and the shoekeeper rescued me and I ran all the way home and here I am. It's the 5th golden ticket. Mother, I found it." Miss Bucket simply stood and stared, while the 4 old grandparents were sitting up in bed, balancing bowls of soup in their laps. All dropped their spoons with a clatter and froze against their pillows. For about 10 seconds, there was absolute silence in the room. Nobody dared to speak or move. It was a magic moment. Then, very softly, Grandpa Joe said, "You're pulling her legs, Charlie, aren't you? You're having a little joke?" "I am not!" cried Charlie, rushing up to the bed and holding out the large, beautiful golden ticket for him to see. Grandpa Joe leaned and took a close look, his nose almost touching the ticket. The others watched him, watching the verdict. Then very slowly, with a slow and marvelous grin spreading all over his face, Grandpa Joe lifted his head and looked straight at Charlie. The color was rushing to his cheeks and his eyes were wide open, shining with joy. And in the center of each eye, right in the very center, in the black pupil, a little spark of wild excitement slowly dancing. Then the old man took a deep breath, and suddenly, with no warning whatsoever, an explosion seemed to take place inside him. He threw up his arms and yelled, "Yippee!" Don't know if you can see. Trying to get you to see that black and white photograph. It's hard to see. And at that same time, his long, bony body rose up out of the bed and his bowl of soup went flying into the face of Grandma Josephine. And in one fantastic leap, the old fellow of 96 and a half, who hadn't been out of bed since these last 20 years, jumped onto the floor and started doing a dance of victory in his pajamas. "Yippee!" he shouted. "3 cheers for Charlie! Hip, hip, hooray!" At this point, the door opened and Mr. Bucket walked into the room. He was cold and tired and he looked it. All day he had been shoveling snow in the streets. "Cripes!" he cried. "What's going on in here?" Didn't take long to tell him what had happened. "I don't believe it," he said. "It's not possible." "Show him the ticket, Charlie," shouted Grandpa Joe, who was still dancing around the floor like a dervish in his striped pajamas. "Show your father the 5th and last golden ticket in the world." "Let me see it, Charlie," Mr. Bucket said, collapsing into a chair and holding out his hand. Charlie came forward with the precious document. It was a very beautiful thing, this golden ticket, having been made, so it seemed, from a sheet of pure gold paper, hammered out almost to the thinness of paper on one side of it, printed by some clever method in jet black letters, was the invitation itself from Mr. Wonka. "Read it aloud," said Grandpa Joe, climbing back into the bed again at last. "Let's all hear exactly what it says." Mr. Bucket held the lovely golden ticket up close to his eyes. His hands were trembling slightly, and he seemed to be overcome by the whole business. He took several deep breaths, then he cleared his throat and said, all right, I'll read it. Here we go. Greetings to you, the lucky finder of this golden ticket from Mr. Willy Wonka. I shake you warmly by the hand. Tremendous things are in store for you. Many wonderful surprises await you. For now I do invite you to come to my factory and be my guest for one whole day. You and all others who are lucky enough to find any golden tickets. I, Willy Wonka, will conduct you around the factory myself, showing you everything there is to see. And afterwards, when it's time to leave, you will be escorted home by a procession of large trucks. Ooh, I love that word procession because I remember it with Ruby Bridges. It's a big groups of large trucks. These trucks, I can promise you, will be loaded with enough delicious edibles to last you and your entire household for many years. If at any time thereafter you should run out of supplies, you have only to come back to the factory and show this golden ticket, and I shall be happy to refund your cupboard with whatever you want. In this way, you will be able to keep yourself supplied with tasty morsels for the rest of your life. But this is by no means the most exciting thing that will happen on the day of your visit. I am preparing other surprises that are even more marvelous and more fantastic for you and for all my beloved golden ticket holders. Mystic and marvelous surprises that will entrance, delight, intrigue, astonish, and perplex you beyond measure. Wow, I love those vivid verbs, entrance, delight, intrigue. We'll have to add those to our chart when we get back to school. Astonish and perplex. In your wildest dreams, you could not imagine that such things could happen to you. Just wait and see. And now here are your instructions. The day I have chosen for the visit is the first day of the month of February. On this day and no other, you must come to the factory gates at 10 o'clock. Sharp in the morning. Don't be late. And you are allowed to bring you with either one or two members of your own family to look after you and to ensure that you don't get into mischief. Remember, mischief means into trouble. One more thing. Be certain to have this ticket with you. Otherwise, you will not be admitted. Admitted means let in. Signed, Willy Wonka. The first day of February, cried Miss Bucket. But that's tomorrow. Today is the last day of January. I know it is. Christ, said Mr. Bucket. I think you're right just in time, shouted Grandpa Joe. There's not a moment to lose. You must start making preparations at once. Wash your face, brush your teeth, blow your nose, cut your nails, polish your shoes, iron your shirt, and for heaven's sake, get all that mud off your pants. You must get ready, my boy. You must get ready for the biggest day of your life. Now, don't oversight yourself, Grandpa, Miss Bucket said, and don't fluster poor Charlie. We must all try to keep very calm. Now, the first thing to decide is this. Who is going to go with Charlie to the chocolate factory? I will, shouted Grandpa Joe, leaping out of bed at once again. I'll take him. I'll look after him. You leave it to me. Miss Bucket smiled at the old man. Then she turned to her husband and said, How about you, dear? Don't you think you ought to go? Well, Mr. Bucket said, pausing to think about it. No, I'm not sure that I should. But you must. There's no must about it, dear, Mr. Bucket said gently. Mind you, I'd love to go. I'll be tremendously excited. But on the other hand, ooh, that's a transition. I believe that the person who really deserves to go most is Grandpa Joe himself. He seems to know more about it than we do, provided, of course, that he feels well enough. Yippee! Shouted Grandpa Joe, seizing Charlie by the hands and dancing around the room. He certainly seems well enough, Miss Bucket said, laughing. Yes, perhaps you're right after all. Perhaps Grandpa Joe should be the one to go with them. I certainly can't go myself and leave the other three old people alone in bed for the whole day. Hallelujah! Yelled Grandpa Joe. Praise the Lord! At that point, there came a loud knock on the front door. Mr. Bucket went to open it, and the next moment, swarms of newspapermen and photographers were pouring into the house. They had tracked down the finder of the fifth golden ticket, and now they all wanted to get the full story for the front pages of the morning paper. For several hours, there was complete pandemonium in that little house, and it must have been nearly midnight before Mr. Bucket was able to get rid of them so that Charlie could go to bed. Chapter 13, The Big Day Arrives. The sun was shining brightly on the morning of the big day, but the ground was still white with snow and the air was very cold. Outside the gates of Wonka's factory, enormous crowds of people had gathered to watch the 5 lucky ticket holders going in. The excitement was tremendous. It was just before 10 o'clock. The crowds were pushing and shouting, and policemen with arms linked were trying to hold them back from the gates. Right beside the gates, in a small group that was carefully shielded from the crowds by the police, stood the 5 famous children, together with the grown-ups who had come with them. The tall, bony old figure of Grandpa Joe could be seen standing quietly among them, and beside him, holding tightly onto his hand, was a little Charlie Bucket himself. All the children except Charlie had both their mothers and fathers with them. And it was a good thing that they had. Otherwise, the whole party might have gotten out of hand. They were so eager to get going that their parents were having to hold them back by force to prevent them from climbing over the gates. Be patient, cried their fathers. Be still, it's not time yet. It's not 10 o'clock. Behind him, Charlie Bucket could hear the shouts of the people in the crowd as they pushed and fought to get a glimpse of the famous children. There's Violet Beauregard, he heard someone shouting. That's her, all right. I can remember her face from the newspaper. And you know what? Somebody else shouted back. She's still chewing that old dreadful old piece of gum she's had for 3 months. You look at her jaws. They're still working on all that. Who's a big fat boy? That's Augustus Gloop. So it is. Enormous, isn't he? So here's just a little black and white picture. Fantastic. Who's the kid with the picture of the Lone Ranger stenciled on the windbreaker? That's Mike TV. He's the television fiend. He must be crazy. Look at all those crazy pistols he's got hanging all over him. The one I want to see is Veruca Salt, shouted another voice in the crowd. She's the girl whose father bought up 1 million candy bars and then made the workers in his peanut factory unwrap every one of them until they found a golden ticket. He gives her anything she wants, absolutely anything. She has to start screaming for it, and she gets it. Dreadful, isn't it? Shocking, I call it. Which do you think is her? That one over there. On the left, the little girl in the silver mink coat. Mink is like a fur coat, an animal fur. Which one is Charlie Bucket? Charlie Bucket? Well, he must be that skinny little shrimp standing behind the old fella who looks like a skeleton. Right close to us, just there. See him? Why, hasn't he got a coat in this cold weather? Don't ask me. Maybe he can't afford to buy one. Jeepers, he must be freezing. Charlie, standing only a few paces away from the speaker, gave Grandpa Joe's hand a squeeze, and the old man looked down at Charlie and smiled. Somewhere in the distance, a church clock began striking 10. Very slowly, with a loud creaking of rusty hinges, the great iron gates of the factory began to swing open. The crowd had become suddenly silent. The children stopped jumping about. All eyes were fixed upon the gates. There he is, somebody shouted. That's him. And so it was. So who do you think they were talking about when the children stopped jumping about and they said, that's him? Okay, you're right. It was Willy Wonka. They were waiting in anticipation. That means they were waiting. They were so excited. They couldn't wait. And then finally, there Willy Wonka was. Okay, and chapter 14 is called Mr. Willy Wonka, but we'll go ahead and stop right there. I know that we've been talking about figurative language, and figurative language it uses similes that compare things using like or as, metaphors, which says something is something else. And we've also talked about idioms. For example, like your head is in the cloud. It's not a literal meaning, but it just gives you a visual comparison. Hyperboles, which are a huge exaggeration, like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, I'm going to die. Well, you're not really going to die because you're so tired. And then we looked at the video with the movies that had onomatopoeias. And we remember that those are the sounds that are spelled like that, like boom, crash, crack. And all these things are comparisons that give your reader a visual and make your reading more interesting. Well, I noticed when I was reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I did notice that they used some figurative language in the book. So as you're listening to the next chapters, to chapter 14, I want you to listen for those types of figurative language and see if you can determine which form of figurative language they are. And I was looking real quick here to see. There were several things that I thought, oh, that's really good. So to see if I could find one real quick. So what I want you to do, I want to challenge you to look in your reading, chapter 14 and 15, or to listen in the reading and see if you can find figurative language. And then when I come back to read to you, I'm going to give you some examples from the chapters 12 and 13 that I read today. Okay, happy reading. And remember, friends, if you've checked in every day this week, you will get a golden ticket and you will get a prize, but you need to make sure you've checked in on the morning meeting check-in. Thank you. Have a great day.